final possibility is that we change in some fundamental fashion that I'll describe a bit more later, and that, in fact, rather than getting bad, as those two barbarization scenarios suggest, things get a lot better. So that's a possibility. The world is an open system. What we do matters. We can change it. I'll describe what I mean by these changes. I'm going to pick out two of these scenarios for particular comment. A lot of what we're interested in has to do with sustainability. We often try to change the way the economy behaves because we think that something that's happening is unsustainable or unfair or in one way or another unacceptable to us. And the way we've done it in the past is this policy reform technique. It's a kind of top-down reform. So the government says, you might want to drive an SUV, but boy, have I got a gas tax for you. And I'm not going to tell you you can't drive the SUV, but I am going to tell you that gasoline is going to be pretty expensive. You follow your own impulses. Policy reform. It's also possible that we have something of a change of heart and decide that we would rather do things in a very different fashion. And what that would mean, I'll get to a little later. But what differs over here on the right is beyond policy reform lies a world in which actually our values, our beliefs, and our behaviors shift significantly. It adds a bottom-up dimension to this top-down world. So let me try to just motivate this choice of scenarios. These scenarios have been used a great deal. Everyone from the UN to local planners have utilized these scenarios for various purposes. One reason that people find them so attractive is that they represent almost a complete view, or actually a complete range of views of the world. So let me show you how that works. Each one of them has an antecedent. That is, you can go back in time and say this worldview reflects a certain thinker, a certain view of the way things work, and you could even give it a motto. And so I'm going to just run through these fairly quickly and let you take them in. I could talk about each one of them for a while, but we wouldn't get through in an hour. And there certainly wouldn't be time for questions. So let me give you some examples. So here, Smith is replaced by Keynes. Smith said, the invisible hand will guide us through. Keynes said, you can get stuck in a hole, and the government may have to lift you out. The Brundtland report said, you may need a snorkel, and the government better get with it and do something about that. Bad Malthus, one view of the bad world. A different view from Hobbes. A utopian view. We can find a simpler, better world. If Gandhi seems a bit remote, how about small is beautiful? Finally, a different paradigm, a paradigm that accepts globalization, that doesn't go small, but does try to go beautiful. We don't have a representative for that. We don't have a thinker. There are some modern philosophers who emphasize a cosmopolitan view, but they don't quite deal with the full range of issues. Finally, most of us don't have any view at all. So one of my how shall I put it, one of the darker members of the TELUS organization added this row, the no view row. Finally, one can try to fill in this metaphor for each of them. It's a little exercise we tried to do. simply to give people a feeling for how the different worldviews would work out. So this is a very abbreviated, but I hope useful introduction to the kind of scenario analysis that we've developed. Let me just say that if the analysis were simply at this level, it probably wouldn't get much play. But each of these scenarios comes with a very detailed, completely well worked out worldview that tracks the economy, demography, the physical flows, the physical choices in the economy, the emissions, the water use, the land use, the forests, the animals, the greenhouse gases, you name it. And it's all done in a way that's internally self-consistent and true to the philosophies that guide these scenarios. That's what people find attractive about it. Let me make a pitch for your help at this point. We're pretty good at finding the inputs. We're very good at organizing the analysis. So we have all of the information flowing through this big model in a correct way. We're really primitive with the output. The back end of this model is very simple. It's tables and charts customized in a fairly clever way, but it's tables and charts. This is not what we need. We could use the kind of techniques for collaboration that are being discussed in this conference. One of the reasons I decided to come here and talk was to make people aware of this model. And I'd be very interested in hearing from you, if not today, then by email, if you have ideas that might bring our back end into the 21st century. Anyway, let me move on. The interest that a lot of people have in our scenario work has to do with the way the scenarios can be used to think about what you hope happens and what might also be a possibility. So this illustrates a bad turn of events in an economy that's a market forces or a dominantly a market forces world. So in the market forces world, we have the belief that the invisible hand will guide us. So that's a nice sentiment. The question is, do we have the remotest idea exactly what the invisible hand will do? One of the things I did on the airplane was read an essay about the invisible hand. So economists thought about a decade ago that if you allowed the invisible hand to guide capital rather than restricting the flow of capital, that as occurred in the late 1900s, capital would flow from rich nations where there were perhaps tight investment situations to poorer nations where there might be better opportunities. And so the World Bank and many financial organizations pushed hard to free up capital flows. And capital did flow after it was freed up in exactly the opposite direction to the one the economists predicted. It flowed out of the developing countries into the developed countries. And so now there's a spate of economists writing essays that say, whoops, do we really want the invisible hand taking this money from where it's desperately needed and putting it in places where it's used for luxury consumption? So this shows a rather more dramatic deterioration along the same line. You hope the invisible hand will guide you to a nice world, but things might not go that way.